Hello, welcome everyone. I am Anindam Ghosh. As I have already informed you, I am an assistant professor in the Department of English, Krishna Chandra College, Hetampur, Birbhum. And this is my 9th lecture on post-colonialism. This is my consecutive 9th lecture on this particular theoretical school. In the previous lectures, I have discussed about the definition and scope of colonialism and post-colonialism. What is post-colonial identity and colonial identity? I have discussed about it. What are the basic principles of colonialism, basic theoretical foundations of post-colonialism? I have discussed about these things. And in the last 3 or 4 lectures, I have discussed about some of the key thinkers of post-colonialism, like Frantz Fanon, Homi K. Bhabha, Edward Said, and others. In this particular lecture, I will talk about Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, to some extent Dipesh Chakraborty and Partho Chatterjee, and I will end the lecture by discussing a particular literary text and seeing I will try to see that literary text through the lens of the post-colonial theoretical framework. So let us now begin our lecture with Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, with the contribution of Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak in the post-colonial theory. She has generally been considered as one of the most influential post-colonial intellectuals, and she is best known for her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? Can the Subaltern Speak? Subaltern কি কথা বলতে পারে? তাদের কি আদৌ কোনো স্বর রয়েছে? তাই নিয়ে প্রশ্ন তোলেন গায়ত্রী স্পিভাক. She is currently an university professor in the Columbia University, a great honorary position, and she is also best known for a translation of an introduction to Jacques Derrida's De la Grammatologie. Derrida's Grammatologie, published in 1967, and translation of Jacques Derrida's of Grammatologie by Spivak, published in 1977. And from her writings, all the other European countries and the United States and of course the entire world came to know about Derrida. And she is also famous for her work of translation of Mahashweta Devi as imaginary maps and another collection of short stories known as Brest stories into English. So she is herself a practicing post-colonialist. She is also best known for her field work in the Purulia and Bankura, and currently she is also working now in Birbhum district. Her Can the Subaltern Speak? In that particular essay, it's a 22-page essay, really a brilliant text, though it's quite obscure in some parts. But Spivak discusses on that particular text the lack of an account of the Shoti practice. Shoti is a particularly a very popular cultural practice in Bengal, where the wife has been burning alive at of her deceased husband. So this particular ritual has been practiced in Bengal for thousands of years. In 1829, William Bentinck, with the help of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, or rather Raja Ram Mohan Roy with the help of Lord Bentinck, passed a law, Soti regulation in 1829, and tried to stop this form of dehumanized form of ritual, where a woman, a widow, has been burned alive. So she discusses the lack of any historical account of the Shoti practice in this particular essay, and which lead her to the question that can the subaltern really speak? And her argument lies in the fact that woman is a subaltern because she is doubly colonized. She is at the same time colonized by her husband, by the patriarchal order, and at the same time by the colonial rule, because the colonial rule always colonized the Indian patriarchy. So she is an Indian woman in the late 18th and the 19th century is doubly colonized, and hence become a very marginalized voice. And she really raises the question whether the subaltern can really speak. So Spivak writes about the process the focus on the Eurocentric subject as they disavow the problem of representation, because they always try to evade the question of the problem of representation. They said that the Eurocentric notion always said that they have put forth a regimented and properly documented authentic form of history, which is really not the case. And she also invokes the subject of Europe. As I am already saying, that both Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak and Homi K. Bhabha, they always talks about this subjective position of the native people. Native peopleদের কি মনের অবস্থা, তাদের সঙ্গে কলোনাইজারদের রিলেশনশিপ কি, সেইটা এক্সক্যাভেট করার চেষ্টা করছেন স্পিভাক and Bhabha and others. Now these intellectuals actually constitute the subaltern other of the Europe as anonymous and mute. So Spivak's most quoted essay is Surely Hard Can the Subaltern Speak, which published in 1985. And Spivak adapts the notion of the subaltern, meaning the oppressed class, from Antonio Gramsci, in order to theorize the condition of the native within colonialism and the woman in post-colonial state. So Spivak actually adapts the notion of the subaltern, which means the oppressed class, from Antonio Gramsci, in order to theorize the condition of the native people within the colonial discourse, and particularly that of the woman in the post-colonial state. And she argues via reading of a woman's suicide, the suicide of a woman in her own family in early 20th century India, that the structure of the colonialism prevents any form of speaking. This was perhaps not a suicide but a murder because of constant suppression, repression and exploitation on the part of the patriarchal family. But this particular story of the suicide has been totally been evaded from any form of historical account. Now this structure is doubly strengthened in the case of the native woman, she said, who is silenced through both the patriarchy and the colonialism. So her argument is almost like that of the intersectional feminisms, that a woman is being exploited not because she is black in the office, a woman is being exploited in the office not because she is a woman, because other white women are there. She is exploited because she is a woman as well as a black woman. Intersectional feminism. Venn diagram আঁকলে সেই ওমেনের সাপারেশন বা অপারেশনটা ব্ল্যাকের দিকেও যাবে, আবার ওমেনের দিকেও যাবে। যদি আমি একটা সার্কুলার স্ট্রাকচার আঁকি, তাহলে Spivak bollo in her essay, very important essay, please remember the name of the essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? In that essay, she argued that the case of the native woman is very precarious because she is silenced through both patriarchy and colonialism for her both gender as well as her race, and hence reduced to silence by these structures. The woman writes her body, and Spivak argues that the subaltern wrote her body because there was no other way of speaking. Subaltern wrote to her body, for example, sacrificing one's own body, sacrificing one's own life for the sake of her husband through the ritual of the sati is actually writing history to body. দেহ দিয়ে ইতিহাস লিখে যাওয়া, যেটা একটা 19th century উইডো পড়েছে কনস্ট্যান্ট প্রত্যেক দিন। তো সেই দেহ দিয়ে ইতিহাস লিখে যাওয়ার কথা Spivak বলছেন, Can the Subaltern Speak It? So I'm quoting a particular interview of Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak where she is explaining the significance of the term of the subaltern, and she said that subaltern is not just a classy word for the oppressed. It's not a very sophisticated word for the oppressed, for the other, for somebody who is not getting a piece of pie. In the post-colonial terms, everything that has limited to or no access to the cultural imperialism is subaltern. Everything that is in fact have no access to the cultural imperialism is subaltern. Subaltern is a space of difference. Now who and She said that who would say that's just the oppressed? The working class is oppressed. It's not subaltern. She said the working class is oppressed, but working class cannot be treated as subaltern. Many people want to claim subalternity. They are the least interesting and the most dangerous. I mean, just by being a discriminated against minority on the university campus, they don't need the word subaltern. So Spivak said that the word subaltern is a very technical word, and it means something very specific. Ones who are oppressed, working class oppressed and exploited people, they are not subaltern at all. If you were discriminated as a minority on the university campus, you are not a subaltern. Then who is a subaltern? They should see what the mechanics of the discrimination are. In order to be subaltern, a post-colonialist should see the mechanisms behind the discrimination. And they are the within the hegemonic discourse, wanting a piece of the pie and not being allowed. So let them speak, use the hegemonic discourse. They should not call themselves subaltern. And she said that they are within the hegemonic discourse. They are within the hegemonic discourse, but they are not getting the piece of the pie, and hence they are calling themselves as subaltern. So let them speak through the hegemonic discourse, and they will claim they are right, but they are not subaltern. So Spivak, in her interview in the New Nation Writers Conference in South Africa in the year 1992, said that everybody is actually not subaltern. Spivak's move is to argue through the post-structuralism that subjects are constituted through discourse. As post-structuralism have already said that the human subjects, that human psychology has been constructed through discourse. And discourse is of course a regime of representation that is being controlled by power. So discourse has been controlled by power. And this means an individual cannot develop an identity without being the subject of a discourse over which he or she may have little or no control. So discourse is an all-pervading, all-powerful mechanism, and an individual cannot develop an identity without being part of a discourse. The subaltern is one who has no position and sovereignty outside the discourse that constructs her as a subject. So that's the definition of the subaltern. Subaltern is the one who has no position or sovereignty outside the discourse that has constructed him or her. So at a colonial discourse, jodi at a particular race ke, for example, Lodh Sampraday ke chor hishebe construct kore, that they are genetically thieves, ei hishebe jodi construct kore, তার বাইরে যদি লোধ সম্প্রদায়ের অন্য কোনো আইডেন্টিটি না থাকে, তাহলে that particular race, that particular community will be treated as subaltern. So subaltern is one who doesn't have any form of subjective position, any form of sovereign autotelic entity outside of a discourse that has created him. So Spivak rejects the idea that one can access a pure subaltern consciousness because, as she argues, the subaltern cannot speak and is hence spoken for. So according to Spivak, subaltern has only been represented. It's only part of the discourse because he or she cannot exist outside of the discourse. She is totally a textual representation, a textual creation, a product of the discourse, and hence she or he cannot speak because she or he is spoken for. Somebody is speaking on behalf of him or her. Is somebody the K? He is the colonial discourse maker. He is the powerful discourse maker. যে এই পার্টিকুলার সাবঅল্টার্ন ভয়েসকে ডিসকোর্সের বাইরে এক্সিস্ট করতে দিচ্ছে না। সো দ্য সাবঅল্টার্ন ওম্যান in particular has no position of enunciation. She remains within the discourse of patriarchy and colonialism as the object of somebody else's discourse. So she has become always the part of somebody else's discourse, the discourse of the patriarchy or that of the colonialism. So Spivak's influential notion of the subaltern notes the power of both patriarchy and colonialism, where the native woman, because of her location within these two structures, cannot enunciate and instead is always spoken for by the intellectuals. So a process Spivak is critical of, because she argues it is better to let the woman remain on the margins of the discourse, thus disturbing it, rather than speaking on her behalf and thus consigning her deeper into silence. So Spivak says that it is better to remain the woman silent and to remain woman at the margin of the discourse. Please let her remain silent rather than go on speaking on behalf of her. Because in the process, you are completely distorting her voice and completely misrepresenting the self of the woman. So he is a subaltern according to Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. A subaltern is one who has no subject position or sovereignty outside the discourse that constructs her as subject. She do not have any form of existence outside of the discourse, any form of sovereignty outside of the discourse. So that's the definition of subaltern propounded by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. And Spivak said that this form of subalternity is being constructed through a form of epistemic violence, what Foucault called epistemic violence. So what is epistemology? Epistemology is the knowledge science, is the paradigm of knowledge through which a particular discourse is created. And epistemic violence means the replacement of a particular knowledge system by another, and by slowly, completely grasping that particular discourse. This is called this co-opting of one form of knowledge by the another is called, it can be termed as epistemic violence. And let us quote Spivak, that conceptually epistemic violence specifically relates to women, whereby the subaltern must always be caught in translation, never truly expressing herself. So this subaltern is womanhood, always caught in translation. Translation means through the works of the others. Because the colonial powers' destruction of her culture pushed to the social margins her non-Western ways of perceiving, understanding and knowing the world. Her own way, a colonial woman's own way of perceiving, understanding and knowing the world has completely been destroyed by this Western way of thinking. And hence, she always pushed into the social margins. Her voice have never been heard. This has been propounded by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, said that a constant and persistent epistemic violence is occurring or has occurred in the 19th century in constantly marginalizing the voice of the woman. সত্যিকারের নারীর যে স্বর সেটা আমরা বিদ্যাসাগরের লেখার মধ্যে হয়তো পাইনি, বিকজ বিদ্যাসাগর ইজ এসেনশিয়ালি আ মেল এন্টিটি। একটা নারীর যন্ত্রণা, একটা নারীর যে ভয়ঙ্কর কষ্ট সেটা তো পুরুষের লেখার মধ্যে পাওয়া যাবে না। অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম একটা কলোনিয়াল ডিসকোর্সের লেখার মধ্যেও, একটা সাহেবের লেখার মধ্যে সেটা পাওয়া যাবে না। কিন্তু নারীর যে নিজস্ব ভয়েস তো আমরা পাচ্ছি না অরিজিনালি। অনেক ক্ষেত্রে রাজসুন্দরী দেবী অ্যান্ড দ্য আদার্স, যাদের অটোবায়োগ্রাফি আমরা লেট 19th সেঞ্চুরিতে পেয়েছি, সেগুলো প্রত্যেকটাই আমরা অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই ধরে রাখি এক ধরনের সেন্সরের থ্রু দিয়ে ভয়েসগুলো আমাদের মধ্যে এসছে। তো Spivak calls this form of censure, this form of replacement of one knowledge with another, as epistemic violence. And she always critiques any form of institutionalization of the subaltern, noting how quickly the subaltern has been appropriated by the theorists and thinkers. Spivak addresses the theme of the institutions, and Spivak is very much acerbic in her critique of the institutionalization and thereby romanticization of the subaltern. Spivak says that subaltern cannot be romanticized. Subaltern ke diye kono dhoroner romanticized thinking amra korbo na, because she is only a part of discourse. She has only her textual existence. Texted বাইরে কোনো existence নেই, কোনো voice নেই, and the text is and the text is being constructed by the colonial forces itself. So she argues that this appropriation, where the ethnic minority angle is perpetually stressed, ensures that their marginality is retained, and it is only through the West's acknowledgement and validation of the margin that the margin finds an identity. And margin finds an identity only through the validation and acknowledgement on the part of the West. Western recognition through the she margin tao thik hoy. So here the discipline of the post-colonial studies itself becomes a matter of suspect, because for Spivak it presents the West's longing for its other. So the entire discipline of the post-colonial studies itself being suspected by Spivak, because it suggests that this formulation, this sort of desire for the other, it actually registers West's longing and for its other. So through Spivak's position, we can gain some knowledge about another specific movement, another specific intellectual movement known as post-colonial feminism. As Spivak herself says, that in Can the Subaltern Speak, that the subaltern cannot speak, because there is no virtue in global laundry lists with woman as a pious item. Representation has not withered away. The female intellectual has a circumscribed task which she must not disown with a flourish. So with Spivak, this entire discipline of the post-colonial feminism actually springs. And Partho Chatterjee in 1989 said that if you have acquired real knowledge, then give to no place in your heart to Mem Saheb like behavior. That is not becoming in a Bengali housewife, how an educated woman can do housework thoughtfully and systematically in a way unknown to an ignorant, uneducated woman. And if God had not appointed us to this place in the home, how a place this world would be. So Chatterjee said that in fact a Bengali housewife, an educated Bengali woman, works in her home, and she works very thoughtfully and systematically over there. And perhaps a Mem Saheb will not be able to gauge the unfathomable depth in the psychology of that particular woman who is working inside the house, and perhaps he is working inside the house in a very willing manner, and hence Partho Chatterjee actually questioned this entire form of post-coloniality and its discourse in this way. So moving on to the next slide, I'll talk about the epistemic violence, the conception of the epistemic violence as propounded by Foucault and later propounded by Spivak, and how this conception is being propounded here. So in broad terms, Spivak sees the project of colonialism as characterized by what Foucault had called epistemic violence. What is epistemic violence? It's the imposition of a given set of beliefs over another. আমি তোমার উপরে এক ধরনের চিন্তা ভাবনা যদি জোর করে চাপিয়ে দিই, তোমার চিন্তা ভাবনাগুলোকে সরিয়ে রেখে, that will be a form of epistemic violence. Now such violence, Spivak says, mark the remotely orchestrated, far-flung and heterogeneous project to constitute the colonial subject as other. So Spivak suggests that this epistemic violence perpetrated in colonized nations was a corollary of the epistemic overhaul in Europe at the end of the 18th century, of which Foucault speaks. And she is both extending actually Foucault's own argument and situating it within a larger global context, suggesting that the narrative of the political and economic development in Europe was part of a broader narrative that included imperialism and the definition of Europe in relation to the colonial other. So she said that she is actually extending Foucault's argument and situating it in a very larger context, that the narrative of the political and economic development of the Europe is a broader narrative that actually included the narrative of the colonial other, and hence therefrom springs the question of the white man's burden also. So certain knowledges in both Europe and the colonized countries were subjugated or disqualified as inadequate, and Spivak gives us an example of the British reformulations of the Hindu legal system. Britishers have completely reformulated the Hindu legal system, and this form of replacement of one knowledge with the other by not knowing the culture of the colonized সংস্কৃতি পুরোপুরি না জেনেই তার আইনটাকে যে পরিবর্তন করার চেষ্টা করছে, this entire procedure has been called by Spivak as a form of epistemic violence. And Spivak in fact cites a statement from the English historian and statesman Thomas Babington Macaulay's notorious Minute on the Indian Education, published in 1835, a very important statement, and I quote, that we must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. So the Britishers actually tried to create an intermediary sort of people who will communicate between the Britishers, the Europeans, and those people whom they govern, the thousands of illiterate people who do not know the language English. So class of persons, Indian in blood and color, very important, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. That intellectually, morally, সাংস্কৃতিক গত দিক থেকে তাই ব্রিটিশদের মতোই হবে. To that class we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature, so that these indigenous cultures ultimately got destroyed because of the infiltration of the Western science and of the Western nomenclature of thinking. এটা ঢুকে যাতে Indian way of thinkingটা এক সময় নষ্ট হয়, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge and to great mass of the population. So through this passage, Thomas Babington Macaulay is articulating a very important theme. He is saying that his main aim is to create a form of intermediary between the Britishers and the millions of illiterate people, those whom they govern. They wanted to create a certain class of persons who will be Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, and in morals. So through this, they will try to infiltrate inside the vernacular language. Through this, they will try to impose the Western nomenclature of thought into the Indian system. So this particular term has been termed as Spivak as epistemic violence. Another very important school of subaltern studies created in the late 1960s and early 1970s, they are called the Subaltern Studies Group. During the discussions of the subaltern themes among a small group of English and Indian historians have actually formed in England, and they led to a plan to launch a new journal in India. And Oxford University Press in New Delhi agreed to publish 3 volumes of essays titled Subaltern Studies, Writings on the South Asian History and Society. Ranajit Guha was the propounder and the main executioner of this school of the subaltern studies. The first and the foremost leader of this literary movement was Ranajit Guha, because he was trying to read history from a literary perspective. And Ranajit Guha had written on peasant uprisings in India, and he tried to revive those unknown marginalized voices in his writings. Much of the collective's early work dealt with the politics of the peasants who had been involved in the mass movements that ultimately led to the India's independence. So Ranajit Guha actually emphasized on the role of the peasant movements in contributing to Indians. So Guho emphasized the role of the Indian peasant movements in contributing to the India's freedom struggle. And the member of the Subaltern Studies group were Shahid Amin, David Arnold, of course Partho Chatterjee, David Hardiman, Dipesh Chakraborty, Gayatri Spivak and Gyanendra Pandey. They were part of the Subaltern Studies group led by Ranajit Guho. So now moving into Dipesh Chakraborty. Dipesh Chakraborty is another famous post-colonial thinker. His famous book is Provincializing Europe, published in 2000. Dipesh charted the subaltern history of the Indian struggle for independence and countered the Eurocentric Western scholarship about the non-Western people and cultures by proposing that Western Europe simply be considered as culturally equal to the other cultures of the world, that is, as one region among many in human geography. So by demolishing the cultural superiority of the Western Europe, he says that Western Europe can only be considered as one of the many regions in human geography. This is his famous book, Provincializing Europe. So in the Provincializing Europe, Dipesh Chakraborty tries to discard completely the European notion of thinking, which has been treated as indispensable, and he says that this is indispensable and at the same time is inadequate to understand modernity in non-Western nations. Some of the key points that I want to mention in this context about the importance of provincializing Europe. First, Dipesh Chakraborty propagated that move beyond the Eurocentric notions, combat the European Orientalism, as already been said by Edward Said. He questions universalism and he dismantled the intellectual, political and economic legacies of the European imperialism by saying that it was specifically an economic dominance. And he analyzes how the post-colonial literatures write back, just like Bill Ashcroft coined the term, the empire writes back. So this entire part of writing back actually contains the writings of the various post-colonial figures. They are trying to reveal the exploitation, the suppression and the oppression and the tremendous agony of the colonizers, the suppression and oppression of the colonizer and the agony of the colonized. So and another main aim of Chakraborty in provincializing Europe is to destabilize the myth that the European experience is the normal path of development for all other histories. Now these challenges and objectives are central to the academic and political concerns of the post-colonial studies. So in this particular text, Provincializing Europe, Dipesh Chakraborty moves beyond the Eurocentric universalism and tries to combat the European Orientalism. Another very important figure in post-colonial thought is Partho Chatterjee. Partho Chatterjee notes that the very idea of the nation, the conception of the nation, is Western in origin. And anti-colonial and nationalist movements adopt the idea of the progress or modernity from the West and launch the idea of a nation. So this very idea of the nation has been borrowed from the West, and hence Chatterjee argues that natives transform the Western idea of nation in three stages. How the natives actually subvert the notion of a nation. Chatterjee says that in the first stage, the natives accept the modern Western ideas of the progress and modernity. In the second stage, the elite in the colony turn to folk and popular cultural forms in order to generate both mass support as well as a new form of identity based on the local cultures. And finally, the third stage, Chatterjee said, the Western and folk cultural forms are projected as a native nationalism by the elite. So the elite actually projected this Western and the various folk cultures as native nationalism. So anti-colonial movement is based on the projection of the Western model mixed with the folk elements of a truly national idea. So he is almost re-echoing the idea propounded by Homi K. Bhabha, the idea of the mimicry, that is the mimic man. So he said that the notion of the nationality and nationalist movements are not original in nature, are not indigenous in nature. They are in fact Western discourse, because they are very much founded with the idea of the nation propounded by the West. So Chatterjee hence terms nationalism a derivative discourse, the discourse which has been originated from the Western idea. So he called nationalism derivative discourse for this reason, and he also said that anti-colonial nationalism is built on the conceptual framework and ideas of progress and history given by the West. So these grand narratives, the narratives of the progress, the narratives of history, has been propounded by the West itself, and only the Indian nationalism is just propagating these ideas of the West. And in fact, we can say that the very idea of the armed revolution, the armed struggle against the Britishers, using various forms of new weapons, are basically using the product of the industrial revolution as created by the English Reformation and by the English Industrial Revolution. So they are basically using various pistols and other instruments which has been discovered by the Britishers. Britishদের তৈরি হওয়া বিভিন্ন অস্ত্রশস্ত্র, ব্রিটিশদের তৈরি হওয়া ন্যাশনালিস্ট কনসেপ্টের থ্রু দিয়ে তাদেরকে এনকাউন্টার করছে। সেজন্যই উনি ন্যাশনালিজম বা জাতীয়তাবাদকে বলেছেন একটা ডেরিভেটিভ ডিসকোর্স, ইটস নট অরিজিনাল ইন নেচার। I have reached almost on the fag end of my lecture, where I will try to analyze two very one or two important texts of post-colonial literature through the post-colonial lens, of course. The first is Things Fall Apart by the famous post-colonial thinker Chinua Achebe. Things Fall Apart. It's a novel published around 1962, set in the 1890s, Igbo Africa, Nigeria specifically. It portrays the conflicts between Nigeria's white colonial government and traditions of indigenous Igbo people. And it portrays complex social institutions and traditions of the Igbo culture prior to the European contact, and how European contact changed this very complex social institutions. কেমন করে ইগবো কালচারকে পাল্টে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করলো এই ইউরোপিয়ান কন্ট্যাক্ট, এবং কেমন করে সাবভার্ট করলো ইগবো কালচারকে। এটা নাইজেরিয়ান পার্সপেক্টিভে লেখা একটা ক্যানোনিক্যাল নভেল, থিংস ফল অ্যাপার্ট। Another very famous canonical novel is Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, published in 1899. It's written by the Polish English author Joseph Conrad. This is actually we can call both a colonial and a post-colonial novel, because it shares some of the grimmest of the racial discriminations propounded by the West. It actually shared their racial prejudice, and at the same time it also shows how the so-called civilized Western people fall prey into this heart of darkness. So Heart of Darkness is basically the story of a journey of one Mr. Marlowe, a sailor, into the heart of the Africa through the river Nile into Belgian Congo. It's actually the story of Marlowe and another ivory trader, Mr. Kurtz, Kurtz. So Marlowe will begin his journey from the city of the London through the river Nile, and then he will reach the Belgian Congo and will discover that Quds, whom Marlowe himself said that the entire civilization has been, and Quds, whom Marlowe said that the entire European civilization has been contributed to the making of the Quds. This Quds will eventually fall prey to the dark civilization, and he eventually actually become perhaps a dehumanized creature. So this Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad actually shows man's inhumanity to man is his greatest sin. It also propounded the idea that the materialistic minds cannot grasp or be interested in adventures of the spirit. A man's confrontation with his dark self is both dangerous and at the same time enlightening. And he said every soul has its dark truth and its light truth, in short, the potential for degradation or nobility. So, of course, many critics, along with Chinua Achebe, criticized Heart of Darkness, Marlowe's 1899 novella, to a great extent, and he himself said that it's actually a misrepresentation of the Africa. It's a great slap on the Nigerian culture. He vigorously criticized it in his 1975 public lecture, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. There Achebe described Conrad's novella as an offensive and deplorable book because it compared many of the natives of the Congo to a dog, to other animals, and Achebe described Conrad's novella as a very offensive and dehumanized, offensive and deplorable book that represents the dehumanized Africans. And Achebe argued that Conrad, blinkered with xenophobia, incorrectly depicted Africa as the antithesis of the Europe and civilization, ignoring the artistic accomplishments of the Fang people who live in the Congo River basin at the time of the book's publication. So Fang people were one of the greatest race who paints and who created many architectural constructions and other things. Conrad, completely ignoring them, portrayed only the uncivilized portions of Africa. So Achebe argued that the book promoted and continues to promote a prejudiced image of Africa that depersonalizes a portion of the human race, and concluded that it should not be considered as a great work of art. In his 1975 lecture, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Chinua Achebe has said this. This is another famous movie by Coppola, by Francis Ford Coppola, Apocalypse Now, released in 1979. This is actually retelling of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness in completely different context, in the context of the Vietnam War. Marlon Brando acted in this film. This is a canonical film, a seminal text. You must watch this film, Apocalypse Now. It actually subverts some of the colonial discourses, and it completely relocates the setting of Joseph Conrad's novel in a different context, the context of the Vietnam War. So this film is highly recommended. So coming back into post-colonial literature, as I have said, The Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe explores the interaction between the traditional African society and British colonizers, a very important piece of literature, because in the novel the character Okonkwo struggles to understand and cope up with the changes got from Christianity and the British control. The novel examines various situations occurred after the post-independence fictional West African village, and Achebe conveyed through his novels how the British legacies continue to weaken the possibility of uniting the country. J.M. Coetzee's writings, Salman Rushdie's novels, Midnight's Children, they are all part of this post-colonial literature. I will end my lecture with the mention of post-apartheid era in South Africa. So what was apartheid? Apartheid was the white-controlled government of South Africa who created laws to keep land and wealth in the hands of the whites. Only white can control land as well as the wealth. Non-white area only বলে একটা এরিয়া দেখিয়ে দেওয়া থাকবে, হোয়াইটস only বলে আরেকটা এরিয়া থাকবে। হোয়াইট এবং নন হোয়াইটদের মিক্সিং অফ দ্য রেসেস একদমই চলবে না। এই যে একটা অদ্ভুত রিচুয়াল অফ আনটাচেবিলিটি অলমোস্ট সাউথ আফ্রিকাতে পারসিস্ট করবে। In fact, it persisted up to 1990s. So, apartheid created a system which was designed to separate the South African society into groups based on race, whites, blacks, coloreds and nations. A deplorable system that existed on the face of the earth. This is the pre-apartheid Africa. Can you believe? Caution, beware of the natives. যে যারা কালো চামড়ার মানুষ তারা এখানে থাকে, সাবধান। অ্যানাদার পিকচার, নন ইউরোপিয়ানস অনলি। একটা মেট্রো স্টেশনে যাওয়ার সময় নন ইউরোপিয়ানস অনলি, অ্যান্ড দিস ইজ ইউরোপিয়ানস অনলি। ক্যান ইউ বিলিভ? This existed around 1980s, 1990s Africa. Post-apartheid Africa ends with great violence and with the complete eradication and abolition of this ritual. So these are some of the foundational works of post-colonialism. Edward Said's Orientalism, The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Of course, Fanon's Black Skins and White Masks, Amy Caesar's Discourse on Colonialism, etc. These are some of the texts which we can read through post-colonial lenses. Robinson Crusoe, Ramayana, Mahabharata, of course, Shakespeare, Tempest, Othello. This is the list of various post-colonial literatures, Latin American literature, some of the African literature, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, of course, Ole Swenka's Death and the King's Horseman, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Petals of Blood, South Asian literature, Akinaran Swamy and Friends, Komala Markondeo's Nectar in a Sieve, Raja Rao's Serpent and the Rope, etc. There is an example of the Caribbean literature. তোমাদের যেটা সুবিধা রিলেট করতে পারো, আই এম সাইটিং দ্য এক্সাম্পল অফ দ্য লাগান। ইউ হ্যাভ সিন দিস ফিল্ম where Amir Khan has played the role of a farmer turned cricketer, and কেমন করে একটা সাধারণ গ্রামের 3 মেম্বাররা ব্রিটিশ সাহেবদেরকে হারিয়ে দিল তার গল্প বলে লাগান। So Lagan is also a post-colonial text because it tries to voice the voicelessness of the subaltern people. It tries to look at the discourse of the marginalized people. যারা চাষ করে, যারা লাগান বা কর বা খাজনা দিতে পারে না, যাদের সেটা যন্ত্রণা খাজনা দেওয়া, সেই খাজনা দেওয়ার প্র্যাকটিসটা তারা অ্যাবলিশ করলো। 3 বছরের জন্য খাজনা তারা দিল না। কিসের জন্য? না, ক্রিকেট খেলে। ক্রিকেট ইজ এ গেম ডিসকভার্ড বাই দ্য ব্রিটিশার্স। তাদের তৈরি করা খেলা খেলেই তাদেরকে জবাব দিল। সো লাগান ক্যান অলসো বি রেড অ্যাজ আ পোস্ট কলোনিয়াল টেক্সট। I'm citing, it's not that Lagan is a canonical post-colonial cinema. It's not like that. But I'm citing this particular text because you are familiar with it. My students are familiar with this particular text. And hence I'm citing Lagan as a post-colonial text. So from post-colonialism we are perhaps moving into the era of the multicultural identity, where we are celebrating heterogeneousness, various forms of national culture, recognizing various forms of regional and cultures, recognizing various forms of socio-economic class culture actually leads to multicultural identity, racial culture, deconstructing various forms of racial culture. So multicultural identity leads to perhaps a more liberal way of thinking. And today perhaps we are on the brink of the globalization of the culture. Globalization of culture means interconnectedness, cultural exchange, community expansion. It recognizes at the same time there are dangers of globalization. homogeneity because it de-recognizes heterogeneity. তুমিও অ্যামাজন থেকে জিনিস কিনছো, আমিও অ্যামাজন থেকে জিনিস কিনছি, একটা অত্যন্ত ইকোনমিক্যালি মার্জিনালাইজড লোকও, and at the same time আজম প্রেমজি অ্যামাজন থেকে কিনছে. So that actually means homogeneity. আইডেন্টিটি মধ্যে ডিফারেন্সকে ইরেজ করে, আইডেন্টিটির মধ্যে difference ki erase করছে, erasing difference from the identity, and hence there is the danger of creating stereotype and various forms of other identity crises in this globalized world. So thank you very much for bearing me for almost more than 8 hours. The entire post-colonialism lecture is more than 8 hours. So in this particular lecture I have discussed what colonialism is, what are the different aspects of post-colonialism, various important terms and concepts related to post-colonialism, like mimicry, like ambivalence, like Orientalism, like universalism, Eurocentrism, subaltern, etc. Then I have discussed various important key thinkers of post-colonialism in the last 4 lectures. And they are Frantz Fanon, the West Indian French psychiatrist. Of course, there is Edward Said, the Palestinian-born American academician who inaugurated the field of the post-colonial studies, the entire field of the post-colonial studies. Of course, there is another famous thinker called Homi K. Bhabha, an Indian in origin who now lived in America and who propounded the notion of the ambivalence, in-betweenness and mimicry and hybridity. And of course we have discussed Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Partho Chatterjee and of course Dipesh Chakraborty in a fragmentary manner. I thank you so much. I am ending this lecture in this particular juncture point. We'll see you in the next lecture series, which will be perhaps on Marxist literary criticism. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.